You're listening to the show all about small business, jobs, and entrepreneurship. Welcome back to Get Down to Business. Get on my website, shalomklein.com. I'm super excited to be joined by Dr. Corey Rosen, founder and senior staff member of the National Center for Employee Ownership, the NCEO, a nonprofit organization that's the nation's primary source of information on employee ownership. And I know he is also the fantastic co-author of Equity, Why Employee Ownership is Good for Business, which came out in 2005, and the new book, Ownership, Reinventing Companies, Capitalism, and Who Owns What, which just came out. Dr. Corey Rosen, welcome to the program.
Thank you, Shalom. It's a delight to be here.
Absolutely. Let's jump right in, because you argue in your book, and as well as so many other things that you publish online, that ownership is broken. That's a pretty bold statement, Corey. What do you mean by that?
Indeed, it is. Well, we have a few different ways of people owning capital in the United States, through the public markets, through private companies and family businesses and the like. But when you look at people today, half the population couldn't put its hands on $1,000 in an emergency. And half the people who work in the private sector have no retirement assets at all. They don't even often have access to a retirement plan. So this is a real wealth crisis in the United States. You know, we often talk about problems of income inequality, but wealth insecurity is an equally severe problem that really hampers people's ability to get ahead in life, to have a secure life, to provide for their kids, and so on. Well, how do you get that wealth? If you don't inherit it, which is the easiest choice, choose your parents wisely. If you don't choose your parents wisely, it can be very difficult because people's incomes have been stagnant, and so they have a hard time putting money away to build wealth. So we need a way for people to become owners, to have that second source of eventual income besides their work and Social Security that is reliable for them, but also is practical for them to get. And if you're asking them to somehow save their way to it, it's just not going to work for the vast majority of people. So we need a new way to share ownership.
Absolutely. And I'm chatting with the subject matter expert on the topic of employee ownership, and that is the founder and senior staff member of the National Center for Employee Ownership, the NCEO. So as you just started alluding to, Corey, I know you are passionate about this concept, employee ownership. We just finished talking about how ownership is broken. So employee ownership, break it down, sort of demystify this concept so we fully understand it, what that means, even for some of the small business owners and listeners tuning in to Get Down to Business or this podcast.
Sure. There are three common ways this happens. A lot of people probably think worker ownership, that's like worker co-ops. And there are worker cooperatives, typically very small businesses where a group of people pool their money and start a business and they're all equal owners. And that's about maybe 10,000 people in the US. Then maybe people are familiar with things like companies who give everybody stock options or similar kinds of grants of ownership. You know, this happens a lot in the tech sector and has made a lot of tech sector workers very wealthy. And there's probably another 4 or 5 million of those. And then there's public companies where people can buy stock at a discount. But by far the most effective and broad scale way of sharing ownership is something called the Employee Stock Ownership Plan, or ESOP. And this is something that Congress created in the 1970s and has been supported in 18 different laws in Congress and some state laws as well, all of which have passed without opposition. The Republicans love it, the Democrats love it. What an odd thing. And what these laws do is they say, if you own a business, you own a hardware store or a manufacturing company, or even a chain of supermarkets, an engineering company. Some of these companies are quite large. Some 20 to 50 employees or so. If you own one of these businesses and you think about, what am I going to do with this business as I get older? What Congress has provided is a way for you as a business owner to use the future pre-tax earnings of your company to buy your shares and put those shares into a trust for employees. Employees will earn those shares through the future work that they do to generate the profits to pay for this. And when they leave the company, they'll get a share of the ownership. And there are about 6,500 of these companies in the United States. They employ about 14 million people and have about $1.3 trillion in assets. So it's a pretty big part of the economy. There are 100 companies in the US, for instance, that have more than 1,300 employees that are 100% or so employee owned. Sure. And the sellers to these businesses can defer taxes on the gains that they make by selling to these ESOPs by reinvesting in other companies. Now, the magic here is, that all sounded kind of complicated, but believe me, it's something you can do if you own a business. The magic is the employees never buy the stock. They get the stock as a benefit for the work they do to generate the profits that pay for the stock that the company provides them.
Well, Corey, let's leave it there for a moment. And when we come back, I know we've been chatting about how widespread ownership is. We'll talk about the exact process when we return on the show, all about small business, jobs, and entrepreneurship. So don't touch that dial. We'll be right back. I'm rejoined by Dr. Corey Rosen, founder and senior staff member of the National Center for Employee Ownership and the author of Ownership: Reinventing Companies, Capitalism, and Who Owns What. And that's Dr. Corey Rosen. We've been chatting all about employee ownership and how it's fixing the issue of ownership in general. We were just sharing some fascinating statistics about how widespread ownership is. So, Corey, I know you're very passionate about this. What steps are you taking? What steps should we be taking to make this idea more common?
The biggest obstacle is that business owners who are thinking about selling their business don't know that this is even an option. They don't think, well, the employees could own the business. The employees have to come up with the money. They don't have the money to do that. And as I just explained, they don't need to have the money to do that because it's paid for out of the future tax deductible profits of the company, and the seller gets a tax deferral by selling to the ESOP. And for a lot of business owners, this is a whole lot more preferable than selling to, say, private equity or some competitor, and you know what's going to happen to your business after that. Here, the people who helped you build it get the ownership. But if you go to your business advisor or your accountant or a business broker, you're not likely to hear about this. And if you are, they'll probably tell you, oh, that doesn't work. Or it's too complicated. I don't understand it. So helping people to understand this is really important. And I'm very encouraged that Congress just passed a bill that will provide money to states to help provide that education. So that's a really critical thing. We'd also like to see Congress provide some loan support for loans to make this more practical for some companies where the financing might be a little bit more tricky.
Well, you've been chatting about this for quite a while now, because in 2005, you wrote a book, Equity: Why Employee Ownership is Good for Business. And now the book, Ownership: Reinventing Companies, Capitalism, and Who Owns What. They're both great reads. And I want to make sure our listeners know where they can learn more about you. And of course, your co-author, John Case, as well, who has joined you in this process and in this advocacy as well. Where can we get in touch with you? Where can we pick up a copy of this book?
So you can pick up a copy of the book pretty much anywhere. Go to your local bookstore. They can order it. You can get it through Amazon. You can get it through Barnes & Noble and so on. You can also get it on our website, which is the National Center for Employee Ownership, which is nceo.org. And if you go to our website, nceo.org, you'll see a lot of articles about how employee ownership works that'll kind of demystify the various ways that you can share ownership with employees, whether it's ESOPs or equity grants or something else, whether you're a startup or you're a business that's been around for generations. And then we have a lot of resources, books and manuals and toolkits and conferences and the like to help business owners and professionals in this field understand how this concept works and how it can benefit them.
Well, that's fantastic. I appreciate you sharing your passion, educating our listeners. And I know folks can continue to become educated by reading your new book, Ownership, Reinventing Companies, Capitalism, and Who Owns What. And of course, visiting your website, nceo.org. Corey Rosen, thank you so much for joining us. And I look forward to having you back on real soon.
Thank you, Shalom.
Absolutely. And be sure to check out my website, shalomklein.com. That's where you can download podcasts from the past 10 plus years of shows, all about small business, jobs, and entrepreneurship. We produce a new show every single week, and you won't miss an episode if you subscribe, rate, review, and share. In fact, that's the easiest way to tell people all about the show, all about small business, jobs, and entrepreneurship. And speaking of small business, be sure to check out our sponsors, Tom Mirabali from healthplanchicago.com, healthplanchicago.com. His phone number is 630-863-3477, 630-863-3477 for all of your health insurance and Affordable Care Act questions and needs. But that's a wrap for us here on the show, all about small business, jobs, and entrepreneurship. We've had some great conversations today. We've learned a lot about leadership. We've learned about some technology. We've learned about employee ownership, all sorts of fascinating topics. And I encourage you, again, subscribe, rate, review, and share on my website, shalomklein.com. To success, let's get down to business.